Hello everyone, welcome to the lecture 32 of week 7 and the title of today's talk is Language and Script. You are attending the course Introduction to Language and Linguistics and this is Dripta. So, today we will be talking about different types of writing systems and along with that we will also talk about the evolution of the types of writing system. And finally, we will be trying to see the relationship between writing and speech. You know that in linguistics we primarily pay attention to spoken language, not written language, but there are certain relationships which are important for us to know along with the development of the writing system. So, if I ask you this very basic question, what is writing? You can say it is a symbolic representation of languages by using graphic signs. So, graphic sign is a very generic term, it can be anything, right, but we do use certain graphic signs to represent our spoken language, but it has to be learnt by a sustained conscious effort. It is not like language acquisition which comes to you naturally. When we learn language with some sustained learn to write with sustained conscious effort, at this point it is important for us to know that not all languages have written forms. There are some languages which are still spoken. It does not mean that they are not languages. There is a misconception that if a language does not have a written form, then it cannot be considered as a language. This is a wrong assumption. And there are some languages which have writing systems, but all the community members do not use them. Either they did not learn it or they are not willing to use them. So, we have been talking about human language which is spoken mostly, and we also said that it is innate. So, you can say that writing is relatively new. So, if you think about cave paintings, for example, cave paintings for 20,000 years ago, it is basically something which is a graphic representation. So, we can consider them as writing, and clay tokens of some 10,000 years ago, which were also efforts of writing. You can also think about various inscriptions in different parts of the world which are basically instances of writing. So, there are people, archaeologists, historical linguists for example, who try to reconstruct the writing systems on stones, tablets for example. So, now let us try to see the different types of writing systems. So, the first one is pictograms. So, the symbols that are the written symbols which are there in the picture, you can see them. So, these we can talk about cave paintings for example, which were probably done to record some events, we do not know. There were paintings of humans, buffaloes, etc., and not usually thought of as any type of specifically linguistic message. So, it is basically, of course, it is conveying some message, but it is mostly drawing. So, it is treated as a part of a tradition of pictorial art, and when some of these pictures came to represent particular images in a consistent way, so it has to be consistent, then we describe it as a picture writing or pictograms. So, here are some examples from ancient Mesopotamia. You can look at them and it is showing some kind of development. If you can pay attention to the first series, you can understand that there is some kind of pictorial representation which is there. The pictograms are direct pictorial representation, but there is something which is ideogram. So, in ancient Mesopotamia also we have seen ideograms which are not direct representation of pictograms, but some kind of abstract nature is there. So, I have put examples of some modern ideograms. You can, these are not direct representations, but of course, these are abstract. You can figure out some meaning from these symbols, right. So, all of us are familiar with these are emoticons, and now linguists are very much interested in talking about emoticons. So, these are ideograms. I am asking you whether these are ideograms, and the answer is yes. So, the best example of ideograms from our everyday life is the emoticons, where we are trying to convey some message through a picture, but it is little abstract. Then we are coming to the next point, the next kind of writing system, which is known as logograms. So, Sumerian inscriptions, if you think about Sumerian inscriptions, some of you are familiar with them, they use something called cuneiforms or wedge shaped symbols. So, if we ask what type of entity is being referred to, you can say that the relationship between the written form and the object it represents became arbitrary. I am sure you recall this idea of arbitrariness from Caesarean conceptions that we already know, and we have a clear example of word writing or a logogram. So, logogram refers to something which is also known as word writing, and if you consider the examples of the contemporary logograms, you can say at, dollar, and these symbols are actually representing a word. There is only one symbol, but it is always representing one word. So, this is known as logogram. Here is a picture of Sumerian cuneiform that you can see as example of logogram. Now, let us talk about the Rebus principle. What is this Rebus principle? When a graphic sign does not have the visual relationship to the word it represents, it becomes a phonographic symbol, a sound representation of the word. So, a single sound can be used to represent all words with the same sounds. So, if you think about this maybe a pictorial representation of the I and the letter I, which is also a word. So, it is an example of a Rebus principle. And the next kind of writing system that we will be talking about is syllabic writing. What is a syllabic writing? You can understand from the name itself, right. So, when a writing system employs a set of symbols, each one representing the pronunciation of a syllable. I am sure you recall the idea of syllable that you had learned in phonology, and we also talked about it for something else. So, it is when we talk about the relationship between a syllable and a symbol, it is basically the syllabic writing system. So, in the early 19th century, a Cherokee named Sequoia living in North Carolina, they invented a syllabic writing system. So, it was used within the community to create written messages from the spoken language. So, for example, ho, sa, ge, you can understand these are syllables. So, these are each written symbol will be corresponding to a syllable, not to a single consonant or a vowel. So, this is a syllabic writing system, and then we will talk about alphabetic writing, which is based on phonemic principle. So, you know what is phonemic principle by now. You can say each letter or letter combinations represents a phoneme. So, we also say that there is a direct correspondence between a phoneme and a grapheme. We also use that term grapheme. So, if you think about the Korean alphabet system called Hangul, it has 14 consonants and 10 vowels along with 11 diphthongs. So, most of the writing systems that we adopt are alphabetic writing systems, but if you happen to learn a different language, maybe you are familiar with other writing systems as well. So, hieroglyphs is a name which is familiar to most of you, that you have learnt in school history. It is related to the Egyptians, if you remember. So, from hieroglyphs to alphabets there is a transition, there is some kind of development of writing system. So, today we will be learning about the development briefly. So, if you think about pictographs, pictographs are related to the Sumerian or Mesopotamian system of writing, and as I have mentioned. So, during the time of Sumerian pictography, which is more or less 4000 BC, the Egyptians used hieroglyphs. So, hieroglyphs is the name given by the Greeks, and pictograms represented both concepts and words for concepts. And after this pictographic system, we can see that 1500 BCE Semitic people who used to live in present day Lebanon, they developed a syllabic writing system called a Semitic syllabary, and ancient Greeks introduced alphabetic writing. So, if we go to modern writing systems, we can say that there are different kinds of writing system available in modern writing system. It is not that we do not find syllabic system and we do not find logographic, those were found only at one point of history or a time range. It is not that, we do have different kinds of writing systems in modern day. So, for example, word writings are common in Chinese. We can say that these are logographic system. The Chinese language has different characters that one has to learn in order to write. So, this is word writing. Syllabic writing is also common in modern world, which is for the Japanese language system, Japanese writing system. It has 46 characters which are commonly known as hiragana and katakana. These are two different syllabary. An alphabetic writing system, you can say the example that we have given, Hangul from Korea, and along with the writing systems we also need to know that many languages use diacritic marks. So, if we follow a timeline, we will be seeing that in 15,000 BCE we have found examples of cave drawings. In 4000 BCE we found Sumerian cuneiform. In 3000 BCE we found hieroglyphics. 1500 BCE we found West Semitic syllabic system of writing. 1000 BCE we found that Greeks borrowed the Phoenician consonants and alphabets, and 500 BC we found that Romans adopted Greek alphabet to Latin. So, if we consider the relationship between writing and speech at this point, we have to think about certain factors which are important for us. Writing includes punctuations. So, what are the exact equivalence of punctuations in spoken language? So, you can say that yes, we can use certain suprasegmental features to indicate the punctuations. Punctuations are actually representation of the suprasegmental phonemes. So, at this point I have a question for you, how do we refer to extra stress in writing? So, if you want to put extra stress on something, how do we do that? So, let us get an example here. If we say Nita said she is going versus Nita said she is going. So, there is some kind of pause which is indicating some contrast. So, we can actually use certain punctuation marks to indicate certain contrasts in spoken language, but it is not always easy and not always doable. We can say writing represents spoken language, but at this point you can think about the spelling reforms that are being done by different speech communities as a part of language academies. So, why do we need spelling reforms if writing will always be a perfect solution for representing spoken language? So, there are problems, we still have problems related to equivalence. So, if we represent or try to represent a spoken language through writing, any system of writing, there are certain limitations. So, we have to address those limitations, and that is why there are often initiatives of spelling reform. So, if you are interested in spelling reform, you can know more about it, and you can also remember that spelling reforms are often parts of codification process. Now, let me talk about something called pseudo writing. What is pseudo writing? It refers to false writing. What are the false writings? These are artificially constructed alphabets to look real. So, we find it in comics, in graphic novels, where you have certain bubbles and then there are some artificial or false writings. This is quite common to us. We try to understand that something is being said by the person, and these are examples of pseudo writing. So, towards the end I will also talk about a few issues related to script, because when we are talking about the relationship between spoken and written language and also the ideas related to scripts, it is important for us to know certain ideas associated with scripts. Specifically in South Asia, we have seen that writing systems are important part of identity politics. So, we can say that South Asia has highest density and diversity of scripts, and you will be going to learn about some languages which are in danger. Let me also tell you that there are some scripts which are in danger, and people are trying to revive the scripts by adopting different methods. And why there is a need to revive scripts? It means there are scripts which are being basically not rejected by the community members, and these are replaced by the scripts like the majority scripts. So, South Asia has a number of scripts which are now not being used by the community members and not being learnt by the newer generation. As a result, they are endangered. So, though there is a diversity of scripts in South Asia, there are certain instances of identity politics which are taking place in this entire area. So, writing systems are studied to understand the identity issues. It is not the linguists or archaeologists who study scripts, but there are social scientists from different disciplines like political science, anthropology, who try to analyze the writing systems, and history of course, who try to analyze the writing systems in order to understand the identity issues, conflicts across different communities, etc. And I am sure some of you are familiar with this idea of nude scripts being created by community members. This is important for you to know that new scripts are created to assert new identities. So, maybe the community is, if it is a minority community, is facing some discrimination, and they try to assert their identity through something. So, script is a tool for them. They try to assert their identity through the newly created script. And if the script is very new, it's also a tool to exhibit solidarity. So, the script will be confined to the community members and not accessible by the other people, for example, the majority speakers. This is another factor. If you happen to know some new scripts which are being created now by some community in Indian or South Asian context, you can ask this question whether there is a need to assert identity by the community members and why this is needed. And at this point you can also see that certain old scripts are rejected to mark the conflict which is already there in the society. So, for example, if you think about the adoption of Roman scripts or say any other popular Indian script across different minority languages in India, and now maybe a community is creating a new script. So why this is happening? Why they are rejecting the Roman script and creating a new script? So, of course, this is to show that we are different community and we are basically asserting our identity through this script. And at times we have also seen that older scripts are dying. For example, you can think about example of Meitei Lone or Manipuri in northeastern part of India. So, they had an old script which was basically died because of the influence of Bangla script, and later the Meitei people created a solidarity among themselves in order to revive the older script. So, it was being used in newspaper after the revival, and now at this point the script is being used by the community members along with the popular established Bangla script. So, it is like bilingual, you can say biscriptal, the community is using two different scripts. So, Meitei is just one example. You can also think about the example of Santali community, Santali speech community, where they have created a script named Olchiki, which is now being used widely across the community members in different corners of India, and which is quite popular as well. It is being used for official domains. So, Olchiki is now being used by the community members. Earlier they used Roman or Bangla or Odia or Devanagari script to write down their languages. So, at times there are limitations of the majority scripts. For example, there are certain speech sounds in Santali which are not it is not possible to represent those speech sounds through Bangla script, which is or Oriya script or Devanagari script, which is the limitation of these three scripts. So, that is why the new script is accommodating those variations in order to create a new script system. So, all these are important for our contemporary issues related to identity and language. So, coming to the conclusion part of the class, we will say that today we learnt about the history of writing, which had several evolutionary stages. We started with pictogram, then we talked about ideogram and logogram, syllabic and alphabetic kind of writing. Then we found that different types of writings are used in modern day, though we do not have use of pictogram and ideogram by a language, but we do have ideogram in emoticon, for example, and we do use logogram, syllabic and alphabetic writing for different speech communities around the world. We also talked about the fact that writing is the representation of spoken language, and there are certain differences between spoken and written language that we can figure out. And finally, we said that script can be used as a tool to assert identity. So, these are the key references. Thank you.